I'll never forget the moment I caught myself rubbing my aching knees and thinking, well, I guess this is just what happens when you get old. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, staring at a photo of myself from my younger days, remembering how I used to run up the stairs 2 at a time, no problem at all. I felt a wave of sadness roll in, along with a bit of determination. I knew deep down I wanted to stay on my feet and keep my legs strong for as long as possible. I didn't want to settle for hobbling around or missing out on the simple pleasures of walking to the park or strolling along the beach. It dawned on me that I might be contributing to my own troubles, and that I should look closer at what I was putting on my plate. You see, over the years, I've come to realize something that might sound obvious, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. The foods we eat either lift us up or drag us down. And I'm not just talking about weight gain or feeling sluggish after a heavy meal. I'm talking about how certain foods can hurt our joints, weaken our muscles, and steal away that sense of confidence that comes from moving around with ease. There's a world of difference between occasionally enjoying a treat and making it part of our everyday routine. Those patterns can creep in unnoticed, and before you know it, they can erode our stability, sap our leg strength, and leave us feeling older than our years. The good news is, once I got serious about cutting out a few troublemakers, my legs felt more solid than they had in a long time. Before we get further, I'd like to know where you're joining us from. And if you get any value from these videos, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. It helps me keep sharing what I've learned about staying steady on our feet and making the most of our golden years. Now, I want to talk about 3 specific foods, or really, categories of foods, that I believe are hurting many seniors' leg strength. Over my own 75 years of living, I've seen my friends, my family members, and even myself fall into the trap of eating these things without a second thought. There's no shame in it because in many ways they're hard to avoid. They're often cheap, convenient, and marketed to us in every direction. But let me tell you, once I made the connection between these foods and my wobbly knees, it became easier to decide, I want to feel good more than I want to eat this. I don't have a fancy degree in nutrition, but I do have the kind of real-life experience that comes from trial and error. I started paying closer attention to how my body reacted to different meals. Some mornings I'd wake up and feel like I could take on the day. Other mornings it was like someone placed sandbags on my thighs. If I had a big slice of pie or a plate of greasy food the night before, you'd better believe I'd notice it in my knees and calves the next day. The journey to healthy eating, at least for me, hasn't been smooth or straightforward. But if I can just share one thing that might encourage you to rethink a habit or two, then I'll feel like I'm passing along some of the lessons I've learned the hard way. So let me start with the basics. Leg strength is about more than just muscle. Our joints, our bones, our tendons, all these parts work together. When I was younger, I simply took that coordination for granted. I didn't think twice before climbing a ladder or walking across an uneven lawn. In my 70s, though, every sidewalk crack, every flight of stairs seems to speak louder. There's a new sense of caution that's forced its way into my life, and it's not always welcome. I love independence, and I'm sure you do too. That's why it's crucial we talk about these foods. Eliminating them, or at least cutting back, can help keep us on our own 2 feet, living life on our own terms. This conversation isn't about scaring you or telling you to throw out everything in your pantry. It's more about shining a light on the connection between what we eat and how strong and stable we feel. Because even at 75, I find it comforting to realize that my choices matter. I might not be able to run marathons, but I can choose what I place on my plate. And that in itself brings a sense of control that I find empowering. I also want to say, for the record, that I used to love these 3 foods. They showed up at my dinner table, in my snacks, and even in my drinks. I didn't always think twice about them. Then, over time, I began noticing patterns. The nights I overindulged in these items, my legs felt heavy and tired the following morning. My knees would pop and crack more than usual, and my calves just didn't have the same spring. In some cases, I even felt more pain. Eventually, I decided to do my own experimenting. I'd cut out one food for a couple of weeks and see if there was a difference. Then I'd add it back in and pay attention to what happened. The results were pretty surprising. The difference wasn't always immediate or dramatic, but it was there, and it was enough to convince me that I needed to make changes. Let's talk about them one by one. I'll tell you what I've learned, how I've adapted, and how you might consider doing so too. My hope is that you'll come away with a better understanding of how these foods can gradually chip away at your leg strength, and that you'll see there are plenty of alternative ways to enjoy a good meal without sacrificing how you feel when you stand up, walk around, or bend over to pick something off the floor. The first category, and perhaps the most common culprit I see among my friends, is those sweet treats and highly processed sugary foods. I'm talking about items loaded with refined sugar, things like donuts, pastries, sweet cereals, candy bars, and even some healthy granola bars that might be hiding more sugar than we realize. For years, I'd wake up and start my day with a sweet pastry, thinking I was treating myself to something comforting. But my body would feel jittery at first, then come crashing down by mid-morning. That roller coaster feeling can be quite tough on the body, especially as we get older. What does sugar have to do with leg strength? Well, one big factor is inflammation. I'm sure you've heard this word tossed around a lot nowadays. It basically means the body is reacting to something that's irritating it. Long-term, low-grade inflammation can affect our joints and muscles. When you're dealing with chronic inflammation, your body is in a constant state of stress. Over time, stress hormones can break down muscle, make joint pain worse, and affect how flexible and stable we feel. I found that when I cut back on sugary snacks, my knees weren't as puffy, and my legs felt less stiff. It didn't happen overnight, but after a couple of weeks, it was noticeable enough that I thought, hey, there's something to this. Another side effect of eating a lot of sugary foods is weight gain. Carrying extra pounds can definitely put added strain on our legs, particularly our knees. I've experienced this myself. Even an extra few pounds seemed to shift my center of gravity, making me feel off balance. I remember one morning getting out of bed and feeling an unfamiliar twinge in my left knee. That was around the time I was indulging in a regular dessert habit, telling myself I deserved a nightly treat after a long day. But the truth is, I was doing more harm than good. The little spike of sweetness felt nice on the tongue, sure, but the after effects weighed down my joints and made it harder to move around comfortably. For me, the solution wasn't to never eat sugar again, it was to limit it. I started by cutting out obvious sugar bombs like candy bars and processed pastries. Instead, I began to appreciate natural sugars found in fresh fruits or in small amounts of honey. I still get that sweet taste I enjoy, but without drowning myself in refined sugar. Another helpful trick was to look at nutrition labels. I used to ignore those. Now I'm a bit more careful. If a product lists sugar as one of the first few ingredients, I think twice before tossing it in my shopping cart. Additionally, I realized how important timing can be. Sometimes it's not just what you eat, but when you eat it. Eating sugary foods late at night can lead to poor sleep, which in turn affects how rested and ready your muscles feel the next day. Our bodies do a lot of repair work while we sleep, and if we're tossing and turning because of a late-night sugar high, we might miss out on that vital recovery time. When I shifted any sweet indulgences to earlier in the day and made them smaller in portion, I noticed I slept better and woke up feeling steadier on my feet. I also can't understate the importance of staying hydrated. Sometimes, when we're craving something sweet, our bodies might just need a glass of water. I've started making it a habit to drink a glass of water before I decide to reach for a sugary snack. A lot of times, that urge for sugar lessens. And if I still want something after that, I might have a piece of fruit. It's these small changes that can lead to a big difference over the long run. So that's the first big category. If you're in the habit of having daily treats, you might try cutting back a bit or swapping them with something that has natural sweetness. Keep an eye on how you feel. Are your legs less achy? Do they have a bit more spring? In my experience, the difference can be subtle, but it's there, and it grows over time. Now let's move on to the second category: deep-fried and greasy foods. This includes all those crispy, greasy delights that we might crave, especially if we grew up enjoying fried chicken, French fries, or fried fish on a regular basis. Don't get me wrong, I love a good crunch as much as the next person. There's something nostalgic about certain fried foods that remind me of simpler times, like a family fish fry on a warm summer evening. But if I've noticed one big shift in my own body over the years, it's that greasy foods just don't go down the same way they used to. When we talk about fried foods, we're often talking about high levels of unhealthy fats. These can lead to weight gain and also contribute to inflammation, similar to the effect of excess sugar. When I'd have a big plate of fried chicken or onion rings, I'd feel heavy, sleepy, and sometimes even sore afterward. My legs especially felt weighed down, like my muscles were carrying extra tension. If you're carrying extra pounds or struggling with chronic aches, adding a lot of fried foods can make that all worse. In my own life, I saw a pattern. If I'd been eating too many greasy meals, my knees would puff up, and it almost felt like they were retaining fluid. My ankles would feel stiff, and I'd have less stamina for standing or walking. Aside from the inflammation aspect, fried foods are often lacking in nutritional value compared to healthier cooking methods. If you're eating something fried, chances are you're not getting the vitamins, minerals, and healthy proteins that can help maintain muscle mass in our legs. As we age, muscle mass naturally decreases if we're not careful. We need every bit of help we can get from our diet to hold on to that muscle. So if a large portion of our meals is deep fried, we might miss the chance to fuel our bodies with nutrients that support muscle function. I also noticed how these foods can impact digestion. A heavy, greasy meal can sit in my stomach like a rock, making me sluggish and less inclined to move around. That can create a vicious cycle. If I feel uncomfortable, I don't get up and exercise or even do simple stretches as much. Less movement means my legs don't stay as strong. Over time, this routine can really wear down our overall fitness and stability. It wasn't until my 50s and 60s that I truly started to connect these dots. I used to think comfort food was just good old-fashioned nourishment for the soul, but it came at a price my legs were no longer willing to pay. Making changes here doesn't mean you can never enjoy something fried again. I've found that using an oven or an air fryer can give a similar crunch with a lot less oil. Baking chicken wings instead of deep frying them still gives me that savory taste I'm after. If you do decide to fry foods at home, consider using healthier oils in moderation, like olive oil or avocado oil, though those are best for lower temperature cooking. But if you're at a point where your legs feel weak and you're noticing more aches, it might be wise to skip fried foods altogether for a bit and see if you feel a difference. Also, pay attention to portion sizes. In my younger years, I could put away a large order of fries with no issue. Now, I find that just a few fries hit the spot, and I pair them with a side of veggies or a salad. At first, the smaller portion might feel strange, but after a while, you begin to appreciate the taste without going overboard. It's about balance and moderation, something many of us older folks have come to respect. An underrated tip is to flavor your foods well. Sometimes it's the tasty coating or seasoning on fried foods that we miss rather than the frying itself. Grilling or baking with a good spice blend can give you a mouth-watering meal without all the grease. I started doing more with herbs like rosemary, thyme, paprika, and garlic. Believe me, I've learned that a well-seasoned piece of baked chicken can be just as delightful as the fried version, especially if you give it that crispy finish by baking at the right temperature. One last note: watch out for hidden fried foods. Sometimes we think of a meal as healthy or not too bad, but then realize we're reaching for sides or snacks that are fried. Maybe a crisp battered appetizer here, a side of fried pickles there. It all adds up. If you're serious about protecting your leg strength and overall mobility, it might help to keep these foods to a minimum or find healthier alternatives. I can say that when I cut out the deep-fried stuff for a solid month, my knees thanked me. I had less stiffness, and I just felt lighter on my feet. That's worth more to me than the temporary pleasure of that deep-fried crunch. The third category on my list is processed meats that are high in sodium. I'm talking about things like deli meats, sausages, bacon, hot dogs, and even canned meats. These products often come loaded with salt, preservatives, and other additives. Now, I grew up in a time when lunch meat sandwiches were considered an easy, practical meal. And sure enough, they still are convenient. But there can be a hefty price to pay with all that sodium and those chemicals. High sodium intake can lead to water retention and elevated blood pressure. When we hold on to excess water, it can cause swelling in our legs, ankles, and feet. That swelling is not just uncomfortable, it can also affect how stable we feel when we walk. If I have too many salty foods in one day, my rings don't fit, my ankles look puffy, and I can feel a noticeable tightness around my knees. That pressure doesn't help with joint mobility. Over time, eating too much salt can contribute to heart issues and other problems, which indirectly affect how strong and active we can remain. There was a time in my life when I dealt with higher blood pressure, and my doctor recommended I cut back on salt. Once I did, I noticed my legs didn't feel as bloated, and I had more ease climbing the stairs. Let's also remember that processed meats are often linked to inflammation. Many of them have nitrates and other preservatives that, according to some research, can irritate the body. Even if you don't feel it immediately, chronic inflammation can sneak up on you. It can weaken the tissues around your joints and reduce muscle strength over time. I remember reading an article suggesting that regularly eating processed meats might increase the risk of certain diseases, but I also noticed a direct effect on my own day-to-day comfort. When I stopped using ham and bologna in my sandwiches and switched to fresh cuts of turkey or chicken, my legs felt better, and I just felt healthier overall. I know it might feel daunting to give up your favorite salty sausage or bacon for breakfast. I used to love sitting down to a traditional bacon and eggs breakfast with my family, but I started experimenting with turkey bacon or smaller portions of regular bacon. If I did have bacon, I'd balance it out with low-sodium choices throughout the day, and I'd drink plenty of water. There's also a difference between having a slice or two of bacon once a week and having several strips every day. Sometimes it's not about giving up everything entirely. It's about finding a sustainable middle ground. We're more likely to stick with changes that feel realistic for our lifestyle. Another helpful tactic is to explore different flavorings that don't rely on heavy salt. Fresh herbs, garlic, onions, peppers, and other seasonings can add a ton of taste without piling on sodium. When I first tried to reduce salt, I worried my meals would be bland, but I discovered I was just leaning on salt out of habit, not necessity. Now, I appreciate the natural flavors of fresh ingredients. And guess what? My body feels better, and my legs don't protest as much when I walk that extra block. If you're used to reaching for deli meats for a quick lunch, consider grilled chicken breast or canned tuna with lower sodium. If you're feeling adventurous, you can experiment with plant-based protein sources. Yes, even an old-timer like me has tried a few meatless alternatives, and some of them aren't half bad. The key is to aim for fresh, whole foods whenever you can. They don't have to be fancy or complicated. A simple meal of grilled chicken, roasted veggies, and maybe some rice or potatoes can be more nourishing for your legs than a high-sodium sausage or a deli meat sandwich loaded with preservatives. I want to reiterate that small steps can lead to big changes over time. If your pantry or fridge is full of processed meats, maybe start by swapping out half of them for fresh alternatives. Gradually reduce your intake until these items become an occasional treat rather than a daily staple. Pay attention to how your legs feel. You might notice less swelling, more ease in your movements, and a general sense of well-being. As we wrap up, let's remember that this journey isn't about perfection. It's about making choices that honor our bodies and help us enjoy life more. These 3 foods, highly processed sugary snacks, deep-fried and greasy meals, and processed high-sodium meats, are obstacles many of us face. By recognizing their impact and reducing our intake, we can give our legs a better chance to stay strong. I've shared what I've learned over a lifetime of trial and error, and I hope you find something useful in my experiences. Maybe it's a simple wake-up call to check the labels on your food. Maybe it's a push to swap out those fried chicken wings for a baked version instead. Or perhaps it's a reminder to drink more water and keep sugar in check. Whatever it is, please know you're capable of making changes. Age brings wisdom and resilience, and we can use both to our advantage. Take it day by day. Notice how your legs feel after a meal. Treat yourself with kindness if you stumble and indulge too much at times. We're all human. What matters is that we keep learning and keep trying to do better for ourselves. Life is precious, and we want to keep moving through it with as much comfort and strength as we can. Thank you for spending this time with me. I appreciate the chance to share my thoughts and stories about leg strength and the foods that can harm it. And speaking of stories, I'd still love to know where you're joining us from and whether you found this helpful. Your feedback helps me keep these conversations going. Above all else, I hope you'll walk away from this feeling encouraged to make a small but significant change that supports your well-being. Here's to many more steps taken with confidence and ease in the years to come.